You know, in negotiations, the person who throws out the figure first is at a loss, right? So.
For baby body parts, Planned Parenthood plays defense after a second undercover video surfaces. See our exclusive interview with the group releasing the videos. Plus,
we do not want him to come and talk on homosexuality in Kenya or push us to accepting that, which is against our faith and our culture.
Keep the gay talk in America. That's the message to President Obama from a group of Kenyan leaders as he heads to their country. See why they say his support for gay marriage is putting our country at risk. And
the grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever.
Bringing the timeless word of God to Cuba, one group is on a mission to bring 1 million Bibles to the island nation, and you can help. Thanks so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. You've probably seen it on social media. A second undercover video calling out Planned Parenthood is making waves. This new one shows a past president of Planned Parenthood haggling over the price of aborted baby body parts. Caitlin Burke has more.
It's similar to last week's viral video and equally as disturbing.
What would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying?
Planned Parenthood says the payments discussed in this video, as well as last week's, refer to payments for the cost of getting the tissue, which is legal. However, Dr. Mary Gator, the Planned Parenthood medical director seen here, later goes on to suggest modifying the abortion procedure in order to get more intact fetuses. That's against the law.
And then if we want to pursue this mutually, I'll mention this to Ian in terms of how he feels about using a less crunchy technique to get more whole specimens.
At the beginning of the conversation, Gator suggested receiving $75 for a tissue specimen. By the end of the interview, she's questioning whether $100 is enough.
It's been years since I've talked about compensation, so let me just figure out what others are getting, and if this is in the ballpark, then that's fine. If it's still low, then we can talk about it. You would. I want to land with you more.
Planned Parenthood is defending Gator. A spokesperson for the organization says there's nothing in the video to suggest any violation of law or improper activity. The White House dismissed the possibility of pulling Planned Parenthood's federal funding. The organization got nearly $530 million in taxpayer funding last year. Republican presidential hopeful Carly Fiorina blasted the Democrats' stance on abortion in a video released over social media.
Democrats have always fought for a policy that says it is not a life until it leaves the hospital. Hillary Clinton has fought to preserve that policy. And we now have a moment in this nation to take some real action here. We can decide, finally, to defund Planned Parenthood.
Following the release of the first video on July 14th, 3 congressional committees and top officials in several states said they would launch investigations into Planned Parenthood's handling of fetal tissue. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
And today we're hearing from David Daladin from the Center for Medical Progress on the video scandal. Our Charlene Aaron spoke with him about Planned Parenthood's methods and what other videos CMP will release.
Planned Parenthood says the money discussed on the video had to do with the cost to transport donated tissue. What's your response to that?
That's simply not true. Planned Parenthood actually doesn't incur any of the costs of shipping tissue, storing tissue, preserving it in preservative medium. Planned Parenthood does not actually ship off or transport any of the aborted fetal organs. That's done by the middleman biotech companies that they allow to come into their clinics, and those biotech companies do all of the work to harvest the body parts inside the clinics, except for doing the abortions themselves. And yet Planned Parenthood is still getting $50, $75, $100 per specimen. So that's just straight up profit for them.
Amazing. Well, they also claim that they get proper parental consent to give the aborted baby parts to research, but you say this is an outright lie again. Can you explain?
Yeah, that's not true either. We've posted on our website at centerformedicalprogress.org. You can go to the document vault page there and actually look at the real Planned Parenthood consent form that they use for their pregnant patients to harvest their fetal tissue. And that consent form, according to federal law, is supposed to include a disclosure about any financial interest that the abortion clinic has in the patient's so-called donation. But that information is nowhere to be found on the Planned Parenthood consent form.
Okay. Well, partial birth abortion is a felony, yet Planned Parenthood's senior director says the federal law is up to interpretation. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that shows a clear willingness to completely disregard the law, and it shows an organization that's very arrogant and holds itself above a law that 90% of Americans support. The partial birth abortion law is very clear, and you can take the statements that Planned Parenthood's senior director of medical services makes about the abortions that she does and that she trains other Planned Parenthood doctors to do, and you can line them up point by point with the clinical and legal definitions of partial birth abortion, and they line up exactly.
So, David, what can our viewers do to help?
Your viewers can do three things. First of all, they can watch and share the videos that we release with your family and friends and coworkers so that everyone can know exactly what's going on right under our noses at Planned Parenthood clinics funded by our taxpayer dollars. Number two, they can go to our website at centerformedicalprogress.org and sign our petition for Congress to investigate Planned Parenthood, to hold hearings, and for an immediate moratorium to happen on their federal funding. And number three, you can contact your elected representatives and encourage them to investigate Planned Parenthood and hold them accountable for their crimes. Excellent. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add? I'd just like to add that Planned Parenthood is clearly in deep crisis mode right now. Their CEO, Cecile Richards, who when we spoke with her undercover, praised Dr. Nucatola's work and said that she was very glad that fetal tissue procurement organizations were working with Planned Parenthood. Cecile Richards today in a video statement is distancing herself from Dr. Nucatola and realizing that there's a fallout from the evidence that there's fetal tissue trafficking and partial birth abortions being done at Planned Parenthood. So somebody here isn't telling the truth, or somebody here wasn't doing their job 2 years ago when their own top-level staffers were doing work like this. So I think that's an important consideration as well. Indeed. David Daleiden, thank you so much for joining us.
To see more on the video scandal and our complete coverage of the issue, log on to cbnnews.com. The uncle of the shooter who killed 5 U.S. service members in Chattanooga last week is under investigation in Jordan. Mohammed Youssef Abdulazeez spent several months at his uncle's home in Jordan last year. Investigators believe that may have been a turning point for the otherwise all-American boy. Jordanian officials say they're working in coordination with the U.S. government. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., private citizens are taking up the task of guarding military recruiting centers. In Texas, volunteers are standing guard outside the Wichita Falls military recruitment offices 5 days a week now.
As it stands right now, they're not allowed to arm themselves or protect themselves. So, you know what? We're gonna do it for them. If somebody rolls up and tries something like that, well, we're gonna do what we can to stop it.
Mac Mastroni says they plan to stand guard for as long as it is needed. American support for same-sex marriage has dropped since the Supreme Court legalized it nationwide last month. A new PGFK poll shows 42% now support same-sex marriage, down from 48% back in April. And when it comes to the clash between religious freedom and a gay marriage, a majority say religious rights come first. Only 39% say it's more important for the government to protect gay rights. But 56% said protection of religious liberty should take precedence. And supporters for religious owners of wedding-related businesses is on the rise. Now 59% of Americans say those religious owners should be allowed to refuse service to gay and lesbian couples. That is up from 52% in April. President Obama heads to Kenya tomorrow for a global economic summit. It will be his first time to visit his father's homeland as president. While some hope the trip will bring closer ties between our two countries, there's one subject many Kenyans don't want the president to talk about: gay rights. George Thomas has more from Kenya's capital city.
Nairobi is getting a facelift. The government has been sprucing up the capital city, preparing to host business leaders and presidents from around the world. But the buzz on the streets is all about President Obama's visit.
I think this is a guy who really appreciates his roots.
Obama visited the East African nation as a U.S. senator, but never as president. His father was from Kenya. and he still has relatives here.
Because he's our brother, we welcome him.
Polls show Mr. Obama enjoys widespread popularity among Kenyans. But the president's visit is not without controversy. You see, close to 700 Kenyan evangelical pastors have written an open letter asking the president not to talk about the gay agenda.
We do not want him to come and talk on homosexuality in Kenya or push us to accepting that, which is against our faith and our culture.
Mark Kariuki is the key architect of that letter. He leads an alliance representing 38,000 churches and 10 million Kenyan Christians. He welcomes the president's visit, but says leave the gay talk in America.
Let him talk about development. Let him talk about cooperation. Let him talk about the long-time relationship Kenya has had with America. But about our beliefs and culture, keep off.
Obama has used previous trips to Africa to urge governments to respect gay rights. Kariuki says the open letter is a warning to the president.
The family is the strength of a nation. If the family is destroyed, then the nation is destroyed. So we don't want to open doors for our nation to be destroyed.
Pro-family activists took to the streets of Nairobi this month, urging the president to avoid the subject when he visits.
Since Obama has a Kenyan descent, I think he should be more familiar with our culture.
Homosexuality is illegal in Kenya and 37 other African countries. In fact, Kenya's penal code says any individual who has carnal knowledge of any person against the order of nature can face 14 years jail time. Bishop Kariuki says he'll fight to keep homosexuality a crime in Kenya.
Because it is an abomination to God.
Top Kenyan politicians are also weighing in. The country's deputy president is quoted saying, God did not create man and woman so that men would marry men and women marry women. Another lawmaker warned, we shall tell him to shut up and go home if he talked about gay rights. After last month's U.S. Supreme Court ruling legalizing gay marriage in America, one politician here said allowing such a thing in her country would open, quote, floodgates of evil, synonymous with the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah. Meanwhile, Bishop Kariuki says the president is destroying America with his support for gay marriage.
I believe that with all my heart. With that agenda, he's ruining America because America has been known as a Christian nation. It has been known as a nation that has sent missionaries out. Now it is a different nation altogether because it's an agenda against God.
George Thomas, CBN News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Asia Bibi, the Pakistani Christian woman sentenced to death for blasphemy, will not be executed. The Pakistani Supreme Court today overturned her sentence. Bibi has suffered in prison for more than 6 years and is reportedly in ill health. The three-judge panel suspended the death sentence given to her by 2 lower courts. A new hearing date will be scheduled for Bibi's case. In the meantime, she remains in prison. Her family is asking for continued prayers for her and Pakistani Christians. Coming up, a former Muslim recalls her shocking discoveries about Islam. We'll follow this brave woman on her undercover mission to expose Islam after this. Listen to this quote. Muslims are normally good people like everyone else, but then when they read the Quran, then they become a killing machine. The woman who said that knows what she's talking about. She's a former Muslim herself who's now facing death threats for spreading the truth about Islam. Dale Hurd brings us her powerful story from Sweden.
This woman is on a mission. She's not a Muslim, and her Muslim dress is a disguise. Her mission is for Muslims to know what is in the Quran, because she says if more Muslims knew what was in the Quran, more would leave Islam. Mona Walter came to Sweden from Somalia as a war refugee when she was 19. She says she was excited about joining a modern European nation with equal rights for women. But as a young Muslim woman, that was not the Sweden she encountered. In fact, she says it was in Sweden where she first experienced radical Islam on a daily basis.
I discovered Islam here in Sweden. In Somalia, you're just a Muslim. You're just born into Muslim country without knowing the Quran. But when you come to Sweden, then you go to mosque, and there's a Quran, so you have to cover yourself, you have to be a good Muslim.
Walter says she grew up in Somalia never having read the Quran.
So I didn't understand what I was part of. I didn't know who Muhammad was. I didn't know who Allah was. So when I found out, I was upset. I was sad and I was disappointed.
She says she discovered that Allah is a God who hates and that Islam is not a religion of peace.
It's about hating and killing those who disagree with Islam. It's about conquering. Muhammad, he was immoral. He was a bloodthirsty man. He was a terrible man. And they can read that in his biography, what he did to Jews, how he raped women, how he killed people. I mean, he killed everyone who didn't agree with him.
Discouraged, she left Islam and became an atheist, until one day a family relative encouraged her to read the Bible. She still remembers the first time she read Matthew chapter 5, verse 44, where Jesus said to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
It was very strange for me, love your enemy, because in Islam you have to kill your enemy. Kill your enemy and kill everyone who refuses Islam. But Jesus Christ, it was all about love and peace and forgiveness and tolerance. And for some reason, I needed that.
She went to see Pastor Faoud Rasho, a Syrian immigrant who ministers to former Muslims in Sweden.
She started to believe, and she came to me. That was the beginning of her trusting.
I was so happy. I was filled with joy. Then I accepted Jesus Christ.
Mona says the Lord gave her a burden for Muslims who still do not know the truth about Islam, and she began to copy verses from the Quran and hand them out on the street to Muslim women.
Sometimes they listen, sometimes they become very upset, and I just told that, you know that your husband, he have a right to beat you if you don't obey him. And say, no, it does not say that. Yes, it says that. I thought that if I tell them about Muhammad and about the Quran and this God of Islam who hates, who kills, who discriminates women, maybe they will have a choice and leave.
But in politically correct Sweden, Mona Walter has come under attack for simply telling Muslims what is in the Quran.
And I've been called Islamophobe, and yeah, you've been bought, you're a house nigger and stuff like that, terrible things.
She has also been called a racist. Walter warns that Islamic radicalism is a serious threat in Sweden and says Swedish society should care more about women trapped in Islam.
They will think like, oh, we're in Sweden, we have a freedom of religion. But Muslim women don't have a freedom of religion. They live under the law of Allah, not under Swedish law. So they will suppose everyone have a freedom of religion. We don't have freedom of religion. It's not for Muslim women, it's for everyone else.
She lives under death threats and sometimes travels with police protection. She wanted to show us Muslim areas around Gothenburg, but had to first dress as a Muslim. She believes if she were to show her face, she would be attacked.
I never go to those areas just to be in me, just to be in flesh and blood, Mona. I never get out of there alive. I mean, Muslims are normally good people, like everyone else. But when they read Quran, then they become a killing machine. This so-called ISIS or Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, they're not extremists, they're not fanatical, or they're just a good Muslim. Good Muslim who follow the teachings of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, he did that. They're doing just what he did.
Walter now uses videos and speaking appearances to spread her message. And she says she won't stop, even though her life is in danger. Dale Hurd, CBN News, in Gothenburg, Sweden.
A very brave woman indeed. Up next, importing faith. It's been 50 years since Bibles have been sold in Cuban bookstores. Now one group is on a mission to put Bibles in the hands of every Cuban person who wants one. Here in the United States, Bibles are everywhere. We can access them on our phones, online, in bookstores. The options are simply endless. In Cuba, getting your hands on a Bible isn't quite as easy, but one group is on a mission to change that.
More than 80,000 Cubans will feel the joy of owning a Bible, thanks to a generous donation from the International Missions Board.
We know that they'll be very happy to receive them in the churches. We're happy right now as we do this work, happy for what's happening, and we give thanks to God.
The shipment comes at a time of growth for the evangelical church in the island nation. Bibles have not been sold in Cuban bookstores for more than 50 years, so the only place people can get one is at a church, and that's not easy, because churches rely on donations, which have a hard time keeping up with the growing number of believers in the past few years. The Cuban Council of Churches, along with the Baptist Convention in Cuba, are distributing Bibles to believers in more than 1,000 churches all over the island.
It is a privilege God gives us to take Bibles to the churches where there is so much need. We're in the process right now of sending these Bibles as quickly as possible to our churches. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever.
This Bible shipment is a big encouragement for the Cuban church, but it's not enough. With a nation that has a population of a little more than 11 million people and a growing church, Cuban church leaders know they'll need thousands more Bibles very soon.
And the goal is to send 1 million Bibles to Cuba. If you'd like to help reach that goal, simply log on to cbnnews.com and learn how you can support this mission. Stay with us. We are coming right back. Well, finally this hour, a word for your Wednesday, and that word is shine. It's a word I shared with a friend just yesterday. He was feeling down, alone, and rejected. I said a lot of things to him in that conversation, but here's what he played back for me from all the things that I did say. It is better you stand alone and shine than to stand with another and dim your light. I pray those words encourage you as much as they lifted him. And with that, I encourage you to make this a wonderful Wednesday. That is going to do it now for CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Have a great day.